Tonight, we're leaving behind the bright lights of the modern world and stepping into the shadowed corridors of ancient Greece. Not the Greece of marble statues and pristine temples you see in museums, but the Greece of whispered secrets and forgotten truths. The Greece where mysteries ran deeper than the wine-dark sea itself, where knowledge was guarded by silence, and where some questions were never meant to be answered. This isn't about conquering heroes or epic battles. This is about the quiet spaces between history's pages, the rituals performed in darkness, the sacred words spoken only once, the initiates who carried secrets to their graves. If this kind of gentle, contemplative history helps you drift towards sleep, feel free to settle in. Dim the lights if you haven't already. Let the weight of the day fade away, and prepare to journey with me into the hidden heart of ancient Greece. We'll walk through sacred groves where mystery cults gathered under starlight. We'll explore temples where oracles spoke in riddles that shaped empires. We'll meet philosophers who vanished into legend, leaving behind only fragments of their wisdom. And we'll discover that some of history's greatest mysteries aren't about what we've lost, but about what was deliberately hidden. So breathe deeply, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin our journey into the ancient world, where every shadow held a secret, and every secret held a truth too profound for ordinary words. In the gentle hills of Attica, where olive groves stretched toward the wine-dark sea, there once stood a place that would become the most sacred in all of Greece. Not Athens with its towering Acropolis, not Delphi with its famous oracle, but a quiet sanctuary called Eleusis. Here, for over 1,000 years, pilgrims from across the Mediterranean world came to participate in something so profound, so transformative, that those who experienced it claimed they no longer feared death itself. The Eleusinian Mysteries. Even the name carries weight across the centuries. These weren't entertainment or theatre, but sacred rites so secret that revealing them carried the penalty of death. What happened within those sacred walls? What truths were so powerful they could transform a person's entire relationship with mortality? The pilgrimage began in Athens each autumn, when the first cool winds carried the scent of harvest across the hills. Thousands would gather, rich and poor alike, slaves and citizens, all equal before the sacred mysteries. They would walk the sacred way, a road worn smooth by countless feet, carrying torches through the darkness toward Eleusis. The procession stretched for miles, voices rising and falling in ancient hymns that spoke of death and rebirth, of loss and return. At the heart of these mysteries lay the story of Demeter and Persephone. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, whose daughter Persephone had been stolen away to the underworld by Hades, god of the dead. The myth tells us that Demeter searched the earth in anguish, and in her grief, all growing things withered and died. It was at Eleusis that she finally paused in her wandering, disguised as an old woman, seeking shelter and comfort. But the mysteries were more than just storytelling. They were transformation. The initiates, called mystai, would fast and purify themselves for days before the central ritual. They would drink the kykeon, a sacred barley drink that may have contained more than grain and water. Some scholars whisper of ergot, a fungus that could induce visions, though the truth remains buried with the initiates themselves. What we know comes from fragments, hints, and the reverent silence of those who participated. The Great Hall of Initiation, the Telesterion, could hold thousands. In its center stood the Anactron, a small stone building where the most sacred objects were kept. Here, in absolute darkness, something occurred that the ancients described as the most blessed sight human eyes could witness. Cicero, the Roman orator who was himself an initiate, wrote that the mysteries taught not just how to live well, but how to die with hope. The philosopher Sophocles declared that those who had seen the sacred rites were blessed both in life and after death. Even the skeptical Aristotle admitted that the mysteries produced not knowledge, but a profound emotional experience that changed the initiate forever. The silence surrounding these rites was absolute. In a world where Greeks loved to debate, argue, and philosophize about everything, the mysteries remained unspoken. This wasn't mere secrecy, but sacred silence. To speak of what was seen would be to diminish it, to transform the ineffable into mere words. The mystery was preserved not by fear alone, but by the recognition that some truths cannot be shared, only experienced. Imagine walking through those sacred halls, your footsteps echoing in the darkness, the air heavy with incense and anticipation. Hundreds of other initiates around you, all united in their quest for understanding. The priests, the hierophants, moving through rituals perfected over centuries. And then, in the deepest part of the night, in the most sacred moment, something revealed that transformed every initiate's understanding of life and death. What did they see? What did they experience? The mystery endures, as perhaps it was meant to. The last hierophant died in the 4th century, taking the secrets with him. The sacred buildings crumbled, the rituals ended, but the questions remain, drifting like incense through the centuries, inviting us to wonder what truths lie hidden in the spaces between life and death. The mysteries of Eleusis remind us that not all knowledge is meant to be written down, catalogued, or explained. Some wisdom lives only in experience, in the transformation of the soul itself. As we drift deeper into the night, let that thought settle gently in your mind. Some mysteries are meant to remain mysterious, holding their secrets like seeds waiting for the right season to bloom. From the sacred halls of Eleusis, our journey carries us northward to the mist-shrouded mountains of Thrace, where another mystery cult flourished in the shadows of Greek civilization. Here, where the wild north wind swept down from Scythian lands, the followers of Orpheus gathered to practice rites that promised not just hope for the afterlife, but actual instructions for navigating the realm of the dead. The Orphic mysteries were different from their Eleusinian counterparts. Where Eleusis offered transformation through experience, Orphism offered knowledge through revelation. The followers of Orpheus believed that the soul was divine, trapped in the prison of the body, and that through proper ritual and understanding, it could be free to return to its celestial home. The story began with Orpheus himself, the legendary musician whose songs could charm stones and tame wild beasts. When his beloved Eurydice died from a serpent's bite, Orpheus descended to the underworld itself, his lyre in hand. His music was so beautiful that even Hades wept and agreed to return Eurydice to the world of the living. But Orpheus looked back too soon, and Eurydice faded forever into shadow. From this tragedy, the Orphic tradition was born. If Orpheus could journey to the realm of the dead and return, if his music could move the gods themselves, then perhaps his followers could learn the secret paths between worlds. The Orphic initiates believed that at death, the soul faced a perilous journey through the underworld, and only those who knew the proper passwords, the correct routes, and the sacred formulas could hope to achieve divine salvation. Golden tablets, thin sheets of precious metal inscribed with mysterious texts, have been found in graves across the Greek world. These were the Orphic passports to the afterlife, containing instructions for the soul's journey. You will find a spring on the left, and beside it, a white cypress tree. Do not approach this spring. You will find another spring flowing from the lake of memory. Say to the guardians, I am a child of earth and starry heaven, but my race is of heaven alone. The language is cryptic, full of symbols and hidden meanings. The soul must identify itself to various guardians, must know which path to take, which spring to drink from. These weren't mere superstitions, but carefully preserved wisdom, passed down through generations of initiates who believed that knowledge of the afterlife was the most precious gift one could possess. The Orphic communities lived apart from mainstream Greek society, following strict rules about diet, conduct, and ritual purity. They were vegetarians, believing that all life was sacred and that the soul might be reborn in any living form. They practiced elaborate purification rituals, seeking to cleanse themselves of the ancient sin that had bound the soul to the body in the first place. According to Orphic theology, humans were descended from the Titans, who had devoured the infant Dionysus and were subsequently destroyed by Zeus's thunderbolts. From their ashes, humanity was born, containing both the evil nature of the Titans and the divine spark of Dionysus. The goal of Orphic practice was to purify away the titanic elements and nurture the divine spark until the soul could return to its celestial home. The rituals were complex and beautiful. Initiates would gather in sacred groves or hidden chambers, wearing white robes and carrying sacred objects. They would chant hymns that told the story of creation, of the soul's fall from grace, and of its potential redemption. Sacred dramas were performed, reenacting the death and rebirth of Dionysus, the journey of the soul through incarnation and back to divinity. Music played a central role, as it had in the original myth of Orpheus. The lyre, the flute, and the human voice were all considered sacred instruments capable of harmonizing the soul with the divine order of the cosmos. The Orphic hymns that survive speak of cosmic harmony, of the soul's longing to return to its source, of the transformation that awaits those who follow the sacred path. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Orphism was its promise of personal salvation. Unlike the state religions of Greece, which focused on communal welfare and civic duty, Orphism offered individual souls a path to divine immortality. This was radical for its time, anticipating themes that would later flourish in Christianity and other mystery religions. The Orphic mysteries spread throughout the Greek world and beyond, influencing philosophers like Plato and Pythagoras. The idea that the soul was immortal, that it could be purified through ritual and right living, that it possessed divine origins and could return to divine status. These concepts would echo through Western thought for centuries to come. Yet like all mystery traditions, Orphism guarded its deepest secrets carefully. The golden tablets give us glimpses of their beliefs, but the full initiation, the complete understanding, died with the last practitioners. We can read their hymns, study their symbols, analyze their rituals, but the living experience of Orphic transformation remains as mysterious as the darkened paths their souls claimed to navigate. As night deepens around us, let the music of Orpheus play softly in your imagination, the lyre strings catching moonlight, the voice that could charm the dead themselves, rising in songs of longing and hope. The mysteries of Orphism remind us that the ancients saw death not as an ending, but as a journey, not as darkness, but as a passage toward light. In their careful preparation for that journey, in their detailed maps of the underworld, we glimpse a profound faith in the soul's eternal nature. The wind stirs in the cypress trees, and somewhere in the distance, a lyre plays softly, its melody carrying the ancient promise that love is stronger than death, that music can bridge any divide, and that the soul's journey home is the greatest mystery of all. From the mystical groves of Thrace, our path leads us to the sun-baked hills of southern Italy, where in the Greek colonies of Magna Graecia, another extraordinary mystery tradition flourished. Here, in the city of Croton, a man emerged who would become perhaps the most enigmatic figure in all of Greek philosophy. His name was Pythagoras, and around him gathered a community that blended mathematics, music, mysticism, and moral philosophy into something unprecedented in the ancient world. The Pythagorean Brotherhood was unlike any other school of thought. It was part academy, part religious order, part scientific society. Its members lived communally, sharing their possessions and dedicating their lives to the pursuit of wisdom. They believed that through the study of numbers, harmony, and the hidden patterns of the cosmos, they could purify their souls and achieve union with the divine. Pythagoras himself remains shrouded in mystery. Later writers credited him with miraculous powers, the ability to be in two places at once, to communicate with animals, to remember his past lives. Whether these were literal beliefs or symbolic representations of his wisdom, we cannot say. What we do know is that his followers revered him as more than human, referring to him simply as the Master, and preserving his teachings with religious devotion. The Pythagoreans believed that number was the fundamental principle of all existence. All things are number, they declared, and in this seemingly simple statement lay a profound vision of reality. They saw mathematical relationships everywhere, in the harmony of music, in the movements of the planets, in the proportions of the human body. The universe itself was a vast, living symphony, and those who understood its mathematical structure could participate in its divine harmony. This mathematical mysticism led to discoveries that would shape human knowledge for millennia. The famous Pythagorean theorem, the relationship between the sides of a right triangle, was only one glimpse of the deeper harmonies they sought to understand. They discovered that musical intervals could be expressed as simple numerical ratios, an octave as 2/1, a perfect fifth as 3/2, a perfect fourth as 4/3. Here was proof that beauty itself followed mathematical laws. But their investigations went far beyond mere calculation. The Pythagoreans developed a complex numerology where each number possessed its own character and meaning. One was the source of all things, perfect and indivisible. 2 represented duality and conflict. 3 brought harmony and completion. 4 was justice and stability. 10 was the most sacred number, the tetractys, containing within itself all the patterns of creation. The Brotherhood lived according to strict rules that reflected their cosmic understanding. They rose before dawn to greet the sun with hymns and mathematical meditation. They ate no meat and avoided beans, which they believed contained the souls of the dead. They practiced periods of sacred silence, some lasting for years, during which initiates contemplated the deeper mysteries without speaking. Their white robes symbolized purity, and their communal life was designed to mirror the harmony they perceived in the cosmos. The Pythagorean approach to the soul was revolutionary. They believed in reincarnation, but not as an endless cycle of suffering. Instead, they saw it as a process of purification and learning. Through the study of mathematics, music, and philosophy, the soul could gradually free itself from the wheel of rebirth and achieve union with the divine source. This wasn't merely intellectual knowledge, but a complete transformation of being. Their studies of astronomy revealed patterns that seemed to confirm their mathematical mysticism. The planets moved in precise orbits that could be described by numbers. The ratios of their distances from Earth corresponded to musical intervals, creating what they called the music of the spheres, a cosmic symphony that played constantly, but could only be heard by those who had purified their souls sufficiently. The Brotherhood's influence extended far beyond their Italian communities. Their ideas about the mathematical nature of reality would inspire Plato's philosophy and eventually influence the development of modern science. Yet they remained a secret society, sharing their deepest insights only with proven initiates. Much of their knowledge was transmitted orally, and when the Brotherhood eventually dissolved, many of their discoveries were lost forever. The Pythagorean mysteries remind us that the ancient world made no sharp distinction between science and spirituality, between mathematics and mysticism. They saw the universe as a living, breathing entity whose patterns could be understood through careful observation and pure thought. In their quest to understand the harmony underlying all existence, they pioneered methods of investigation that would eventually grow into modern mathematics and physics. As we drift deeper into the night, let the Pythagorean vision of cosmic harmony settle gently in your mind. Imagine the music of the spheres playing softly in the darkness, not audible to ordinary ears, but felt in the rhythm of your breathing, in the beating of your heart, in the quiet mathematics of sleep itself. The ancient philosophers believed that in sleep, The soul temporarily freed itself from the body's limitations and could perceive truths hidden from waking consciousness. The wind carries the scent of Mediterranean herbs across the hills of Croton, where the brotherhood once gathered to contemplate the eternal patterns. Their voices have long since faded, but their questions echo still. What is the relationship between mind and cosmos? How can human consciousness participate in the divine order? What harmonies await those who seek to understand the deepest structures of existence? In the gentle mathematics of your breathing, in the quiet rhythm of your heartbeat, perhaps you can hear an echo of that ancient music, reminding you that you too are part of the vast symphony of existence, a unique note in the endless composition of the cosmos. Our journey through the mysteries of ancient Greece now carries us to the most famous oracle in the ancient world, the sacred site of Delphi, where the god Apollo spoke through his chosen priestess, the Pythia. Nestled high on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, surrounded by olive groves and sacred springs, Delphi was considered the center of the world, the place where heaven and earth met in prophetic communion. For over 1,000 years, pilgrims journeyed from across the Mediterranean to seek guidance from the oracle. Kings and commoners alike climbed the sacred way, bringing their questions and offerings to the god who promised to reveal the future. Yet the oracle's responses were rarely straightforward. Instead, they came wrapped in riddles, metaphors, and ambiguous language that required careful interpretation. The mystery of Delphi begins with the setting itself. The temple stood over a natural chasm in the earth, from which sweet-smelling vapors rose. Ancient writers describe these fumes as the breath of the god himself, capable of inducing the prophetic trance in his priestess. Modern geologists have discovered that the site lies at the intersection of two fault lines, which may have released ethylene gas, a substance known to produce euphoric and visionary states. The Pythia herself was typically a peasant woman, chosen not for her education or noble birth, but for her purity and receptivity to divine inspiration. She would purify herself in the sacred spring of Castalia, then descend into the inner sanctum of the temple, where she would sit on a tripod over the sacred chasm. Chewing laurel leaves and breathing the rising vapors, she would enter the trance state that allowed Apollo to speak through her. The process of consultation was elaborate and sacred. Pilgrims would first offer sacrifices and pay substantial fees. They would wait their turn, sometimes for days, while the priest determined whether the god was willing to speak. When the time came, they would present their questions to the Pythia, who would utter her responses in the grip of divine possession. But here lies one of Delphi's greatest mysteries. The priestess's words were often unintelligible, requiring interpretation by the temple priests. Were these priests faithful translators of divine wisdom, or were they clever manipulators who shaped the oracle's responses to serve their own purposes? The ambiguous nature of the prophecies certainly allowed for multiple interpretations, ensuring that the oracle could rarely be proven wrong. The most famous example of this ambiguity concerns King Croesus of Lydia, who asked whether he should attack the Persian Empire. The oracle replied that if he crossed the river Halys, he would destroy a great empire. Encouraged by this prophecy, Croesus invaded Persia, only to see his own empire destroyed by Cyrus the Great. The oracle had been technically correct, but not in the way the king had hoped. Yet despite their ambiguity, the oracle's pronouncements shaped the course of history. The Delphic maxims, know thyself and nothing in excess, became foundational principles of Greek philosophy. The oracle's support for certain colonies and military ventures influenced the expansion of Greek civilization. Even the great philosophers like Socrates acknowledged the oracle's wisdom, with Socrates famously declaring that the Pythia's pronouncement that he was the wisest man in Athens had led him to his life's work of philosophical inquiry. The sacred site itself was a marvel of ancient engineering and artistry. The Temple of Apollo, rebuilt several times after earthquakes and fires, stood as a testament to Greek architectural genius. The surrounding sacred precinct contained treasuries built by various city-states, each trying to outdo the others in magnificence. The theatre, carved into the mountainside, hosted the Pythian Games, second only to the Olympics in importance. But perhaps the most mysterious aspect of Delphi was the oracle's apparent ability to transcend the limitations of ordinary human consciousness. Whether through divine inspiration, psychological insight, or clever political maneuvering, the Pythia's responses often contained wisdom that seemed to come from beyond the normal boundaries of human knowledge. The oracle understood that the future was not fixed, but fluid, shaped by the choices humans made in response to the guidance they received. The decline of Delphi came gradually, as the rise of Christianity and changing political circumstances reduced the oracle's influence. The last recorded prophecy was given in 393 AD, when the oracle declared that the sacred springs had run dry and the god had departed. The temple was closed by imperial decree, and the site fell into ruin. Yet the mystery of Delphi endures. Modern visitors to the site often report feeling a profound sense of peace and connection to something greater than themselves. The natural beauty of the location, the weight of history, and the lingering sense of the sacred combine to create an atmosphere where the boundary between the mundane and the divine seems thin. As you settle deeper into sleep, let the ancient wisdom of Delphi whisper its eternal truths. The oracle's most profound message was perhaps the simplest, that true wisdom begins with understanding the limits of human knowledge. In recognizing what we cannot know, we open ourselves to mystery, to wonder, and to the possibility that consciousness itself might be far more vast and interconnected than we imagine. The mountain winds still blow through the ruins of Delphi, carrying echoes of ancient questions and timeless wisdom. In the quiet of the night, perhaps you can hear them too, reminding you that the greatest mysteries are not problems to be solved, but invitations to deeper understanding, gateways to the infinite questions that make life worth living. From the windswept heights of Delphi, our journey takes us eastward across the wine-dark Aegean to the sacred island of Samothrace, where perhaps the most exclusive mystery cult in all of Greece held its ancient rites. Here, on this rocky outcrop in the northern sea, the great gods offered initiation to only the most worthy souls, and those who participated carried with them a protection so powerful that it was said to preserve them even in the depths of the ocean. The Samothracian mysteries were different from all others. Where Eleusis promised transformation and Orphism offered knowledge, Samothrace granted something far more practical and immediate: protection from the dangers of the sea. This was no small gift in a world where merchants, soldiers, and pilgrims constantly risked their lives crossing the treacherous waters of the Mediterranean. The island itself seemed chosen by the gods for mystery. Rising abruptly from the dark waters, its peaks shrouded in mist and legend, Samothrace possessed an otherworldly quality that struck all who approached it. The ancient geographer Strabo wrote that the island's very appearance inspired religious awe, and modern visitors often report the same sense of entering a realm where the ordinary rules of existence no longer apply. The great gods of Samothrace were ancient beyond memory, their names and natures lost in the mists of pre-Greek tradition. They were associated with the sea, with fertility, with the primal forces that governed life and death. The Greeks identified them with various deities from their own pantheon, but the islanders maintained that these were far older powers, gods who had ruled the seas before Zeus claimed the sky. The initiation into the Samothracian mysteries was unique in the ancient world. Unlike other mystery cults that required extensive preparation and purification, the Samothracian rites were open to all who sought them: slaves and free men, Greeks and barbarians, men and women alike. The only requirement was sincere desire for the protection of the great gods. The process began with a confession of the candidate's worst sin, spoken aloud before the sacred assembly. This was not for forgiveness, but for purification. The gods could not protect those who carried hidden guilt. The confession was followed by a ritual, washing in the sacred springs that bubbled up from the island's heart. Waters that were said to carry the blessing of the great gods themselves. The actual initiation took place in a circular building called the Arsinoeon, one of the largest roofed structures in the ancient world. Here, in the flickering light of sacred flames, the candidates would witness dramatic presentations of the myths of the great gods, participate in ritual meals, and receive the sacred symbols of protection, iron rings that they would wear for the rest of their lives. But the true mystery of Samothrace lay not in what was revealed, but in what was experienced. Initiates spoke of a profound sense of connection to the primal forces of nature, of feeling themselves embraced by powers older than human civilization. They described visions of the sea's depths, of understanding the hidden currents that moved beneath the waves, of receiving knowledge that would guide them safely through all future journeys. The protection offered by the Samothracian initiation was legendary throughout the ancient world. Ships carrying initiates were said to be preserved from storms and pirates. Merchants who wore the sacred iron rings prospered in their ventures. Even the great historian Herodotus, himself an initiate, attributed his safe travels to the protection of the great gods. The most famous testimony to the power of the Samothracian mysteries came from the royal house of Macedonia. Philip II, father of Alexander the Great, was initiated on the island and met his future wife Olympias during the ceremonies. Their son Alexander carried the protection of the great gods throughout his conquests, and many believed that his unprecedented success was due in part to the favor of the ancient powers of Samothrace. The rituals themselves were conducted in multiple languages, reflecting the international character of the cult. Greek, Thracian, and languages lost to history all mingled in the sacred ceremonies. The priests, known as apoptai, were said to possess the ability to see into the future, to understand the hidden patterns of fate, and to guide the initiated through the dangers that lay ahead. The island's sacred precinct was a marvel of ancient architecture. The sanctuary of the great gods contained buildings that spanned centuries of construction, each generation adding to the glory of the holy site. The theatre, carved into the hillside, hosted performances that were said to be attended by the gods themselves. The sacred way wound through groves of ancient trees, past springs that never ran dry, to the very heart of the mystery. Unlike other mystery cults that focused on the afterlife, the Samothracian mysteries dealt with the immediate concerns of mortal existence. The great gods offered protection in this world, guidance for the living, and power to overcome the challenges of daily life. This practical mysticism appealed to merchants, sailors, and travelers who needed divine help not in some distant paradise, but in the here and now. The decline of the Samothracian mysteries paralleled the decline of the sea-based civilization that had sustained them. As Rome consolidated its power and the Mediterranean became a Roman lake, the need for divine protection from the dangers of the sea seemed less urgent. The rise of Christianity, with its promise of universal salvation, gradually replaced the older mysteries that had served specific communities and needs. Yet the influence of Samothrace extended far beyond its island shores. The concept of protective initiation, of divine favor earned through ritual participation, would echo through later religious traditions. The idea that the gods could be approached directly, without the mediation of state religion, helped prepare the way for the more personal forms of spirituality that would characterize the later ancient world. As the night deepens around us, let the sound of distant waves carry you towards sleep. The mysteries of Samothrace remind us that the ancients understood something we often forget, that we are not isolated individuals struggling alone against an indifferent universe, but part of a vast web of connection that includes forces beyond our ordinary perception. In seeking the protection of the great gods, the initiates of Samothrace acknowledged their dependence on powers greater than themselves, and in that acknowledgement found a strength that could carry them safely through any storm. The iron rings of the initiates have long since crumbled to dust, but the protection they symbolized remains available to all who seek it. Not in the form of ancient gods or forgotten rituals, but in the recognition that we are held and supported by forces we cannot fully understand, guided by wisdom deeper than our fears, and protected by a love that surpasses our comprehension. The waves continue to wash against the shores of Samothrace, carrying whispers of ancient blessings across the dark waters. In their eternal rhythm, perhaps you can hear the promise that was made to every initiate, that no one who seeks sincerely will be left to face the storms of existence alone. Our journey through the mysteries of ancient Greece now leads us to one of the most enigmatic figures in all of philosophy, Empedocles of Acragas, the man who claimed to be a god walking among mortals. In the Greek colonies of Sicily, where Mount Etna brooded over fertile valleys and the sea stretched endlessly toward Africa, this extraordinary thinker developed ideas so radical, so profound, that they would echo through Western thought for millennia. Empedocles was unlike any other philosopher of his time. While his contemporaries sat in schools and debated abstract principles, he walked through the cities of Sicily, performing what seemed like miracles. He claimed to control the winds, to bring the dead back to life, to possess memories of his previous incarnations. To his followers, he was a divine being who had descended from the celestial realm to teach humanity the secrets of existence. The man himself was a figure of legendary proportions. He wore purple robes and a golden crown, bronze sandals on his feet, and his hair flowed long and free in defiance of conventional fashion. He spoke with the authority of one who had seen the hidden workings of the cosmos, who understood the eternal cycles that governed all existence. His very presence seemed to radiate a power that ordinary mortals could barely comprehend. But behind the theatrical exterior lay a mind of extraordinary depth and originality. Empedocles was the first philosopher to propose that all matter was composed of 4 fundamental elements: earth, air, fire, and water. These elements, he taught, were eternal and unchanging, but they could combine in infinite ways to create the endless diversity of the physical world. This insight would prove remarkably prescient, anticipating modern atomic theory by over 2 millennia. More revolutionary still was his understanding of the forces that governed these combinations. He identified 2 cosmic principles, love and strife, that eternally struggled for dominance over the elements. Love brought things together, creating harmony, beauty, and life. Strife pulled them apart, generating conflict, dissolution, and death. The entire cosmos, he taught, was caught in an eternal cycle between these 2 forces, moving from unity to separation and back again. This cosmic vision had profound implications for human existence. According to Empedocles, the soul was not a separate substance, but a particular arrangement of the 4 elements, held together by love and threatened by strife. Death was not the end, but a transformation. The elements that had composed one form of life would recombine to create new forms, carrying with them the accumulated wisdom of previous existences. The doctrine of reincarnation took on new meaning in Empedocles' philosophy. He claimed to remember his previous lives in vivid detail, as a boy, a girl, a bird, a fish, even a plant. These were not mere metaphors, but literal memories of his soul's journey through the cycles of existence. Each incarnation was both a punishment for past sins and an opportunity for spiritual growth, a chance to learn the lessons needed for eventual return to divine status. The path to liberation lay in understanding the true nature of existence and aligning oneself with the cosmic principle of love. Through purification rituals, dietary restrictions, and philosophical contemplation, the soul could gradually free itself from the cycle of reincarnation. Those who achieved this liberation would join the company of the gods, dwelling in realms of pure harmony beyond the reach of strife. Empedocles taught these mysteries not in formal schools, but through wandering from city to city, gathering followers who were drawn by his charismatic presence and profound insights. He established mystery cults that combined philosophical instruction with ritual practice, creating communities of initiates who sought to live according to his cosmic vision. The rituals themselves were elaborate and beautiful. Followers would gather in sacred groves or hidden chambers, wearing white robes and carrying golden vessels filled with purifying substances. They would chant hymns that told the story of the soul's journey through the elements, participate in symbolic meals that represented the harmony of love, and perform ceremonies designed to align their inner nature with the cosmic order. Central to these practices was the cultivation of memory, not ordinary memory, but the divine recollection of the soul's true nature and eternal journey. Through meditation, ritual, and philosophical study, initiates sought to pierce the veil of ordinary consciousness and remember their divine origins. This remembrance was not merely intellectual, but transformative, gradually reshaping the soul until it could transcend the limitations of mortal existence. The medical practices associated with Empedocles' teachings were equally remarkable. He understood disease as a disruption of the elemental balance within the body, and his treatments sought to restore harmony through natural means. His followers practiced a form of holistic medicine that treated the whole person, body, soul, and spirit, rather than merely addressing symptoms. The end of Empedocles' life became as legendary as his teachings. According to tradition, he threw himself into the crater of Mount Etna, believing that his divine nature would allow him to survive the flames and ascend to join the gods. Whether this was literal truth or symbolic story, it captured the essence of his philosophy. The belief that the human soul could transcend its mortal limitations and return to its divine source. The influence of Empedocles extended far beyond his immediate followers. His four-element theory would become the foundation of ancient physics and remain influential until the rise of modern chemistry. His understanding of love and strife as cosmic forces would inspire poets, philosophers, and mystics for centuries. Even his more esoteric teachings about reincarnation and divine transformation would find echoes in later religious traditions. Perhaps most importantly, Empedocles demonstrated that philosophy could be more than mere intellectual exercise. It could be a way of life, a path to transformation, a means of transcending the ordinary limitations of human existence. His mystery cults showed that the deepest truths could not be simply taught, but had to be experienced, lived, and embodied. As the night grows deeper and your breathing becomes more regular, let the cosmic vision of Empedocles settle gently in your consciousness. Imagine the eternal dance of love and strife, the endless combinations and separations of the elements, the soul's long journey through countless forms toward its ultimate destination. In this vision, every moment of existence becomes meaningful, every experience a step along the path toward divine reunion. The wind carries the scent of Sicilian orange blossoms across the ancient valleys where Empedocles once walked. His voice has long since fallen silent, but his vision endures. The understanding that we are all part of a vast cosmic symphony, notes in an eternal composition that moves from harmony to discord and back to harmony again. In the rhythm of your heartbeat, in the flow of your breath, in the gentle drift towards sleep. Perhaps you can sense that ancient music still playing, reminding you that you too are a divine spark, temporarily clothed in mortal form, destined ultimately to return to the source from which all things arise. The mysteries of Empedocles whisper their eternal promise, that transformation is possible, that the soul can transcend its limitations, and that love, in the end, is stronger than strife. In the quiet of the night, as consciousness fades and dreams begin, maybe you can feel that cosmic love holding you, guiding you, carrying you safely through the darkness toward the light. From the sun-drenched shores of Sicily, Our journey through the mysteries of ancient Greece carries us to a place where philosophy and mysticism converged in ways that would influence Western thought for centuries to come. In the bustling agora of Athens, where merchants hawked their wares and politicians debated the affairs of state, there walked a man whose very presence seemed to embody the deepest questions of existence. His name was Socrates, and though he claimed to know nothing, his relentless questioning would unlock mysteries that had remained hidden since the dawn of human consciousness. But Socrates was more than just a philosopher. To those who knew him well, he was something approaching a mystic, a man who experienced visions, heard divine voices, and possessed an inner guidance that seemed to come from beyond the ordinary world. Throughout his life, he spoke of his daemonion, a divine sign that would warn him when he was about to make a mistake. This wasn't mere superstition, but a profound spiritual experience that shaped every aspect of his existence. The mystery of Socrates begins with his method of inquiry. Unlike the sophists who claimed to possess knowledge and sold it for money, Socrates insisted that he knew nothing. This wasn't false modesty, but a genuine recognition of the limits of human understanding. Through his famous method of questioning, he would lead his companions to discover that they too knew far less than they thought they did. This process of intellectual humility opened the door to genuine wisdom, but there was something deeper at work in Socratic questioning than mere intellectual exercise. Those who engaged with him described a profound transformation of consciousness, a sudden recognition of truths that had been present all along, but hidden beneath layers of assumption and convention. The process was often uncomfortable, even painful, as cherished beliefs dissolved under the pressure of rigorous examination. Yet those who endured this philosophical midwifery emerged with a clarity of vision that changed their lives forever. The setting of these encounters was itself significant. Socrates rarely taught in formal schools or private houses, but conducted his inquiries in the public spaces of Athens, the gymnasium, the marketplace, the porticos where citizens gathered to discuss the affairs of the day. This democratic approach to philosophy reflected his belief that wisdom was not the possession of an elite few, but the birthright of every human soul. His circle of followers was unlike any other philosophical school. They were not students in the conventional sense, but fellow seekers, drawn by the magnetic power of his personality and the depth of his insights. Among them were aristocrats like Alcibiades, who would become one of Athens' most famous generals, and Plato, who would preserve and transmit his master's teachings to future generations. Yet Socrates treated all who approached him with the same respect, whether they were wealthy citizens or humble craftsmen. The conversations that took place in these informal gatherings were extraordinary. Socrates would begin with seemingly simple questions. What is justice? What is courage? What is love? And through patient questioning, reveal the profound complexity hidden beneath these familiar concepts. His companions would offer definitions that seemed obviously correct, only to discover under examination that they contained contradictions and assumptions that could not be sustained. The process was like a form of spiritual archaeology, carefully excavating layers of inherited opinion to uncover the bedrock of genuine understanding. Those who participated described it as simultaneously liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it freed them from the prison of unexamined beliefs. Terrifying because it left them suspended in a state of productive uncertainty where new insights could emerge. Central to Socratic philosophy was the famous declaration that the unexamined life is not worth living. This wasn't merely an intellectual proposition, but a call to spiritual awakening. Socrates believed that most people lived in a kind of waking sleep, going through the motions of existence without ever questioning the fundamental assumptions that governed their choices. True life, authentic existence, required constant self-examination and the courage to face uncomfortable truths about oneself and one's world. The divine sign that Socrates experienced throughout his life added another dimension to his philosophical mission. This daimonion would speak to him at crucial moments, always warning him away from actions that would be harmful or mistaken. He never claimed that this voice commanded him to take positive action, only that it prevented him from making errors. This divine guidance was not a privilege that set him apart from others, but a natural faculty that all humans possessed if they learned to listen with sufficient attention. The trial and death of Socrates became the ultimate expression of his philosophical commitment. Accused of corrupting the youth of Athens and introducing new gods, he could easily have escaped punishment by fleeing the city or moderating his teachings. Instead, he chose to face his accusers with the same fearless questioning that had characterized his entire life. His defense, as recorded by Plato, was not a plea for mercy, but a bold assertion of the philosopher's duty to pursue truth, regardless of the consequences. Even in prison, awaiting execution, Socrates continued to embody his teaching. His final conversations with his disciples, preserved in Plato's dialogues, reveal a man at peace with his fate, curious about what might await him after death, and utterly convinced that no harm could come to a good man in this world or the next. His calm acceptance of the hemlock cup became a model of philosophical courage that would inspire seekers for centuries to come. The mystery of Socrates extends beyond his historical existence to the profound questions he raised about the nature of human consciousness itself. His insistence that virtue was knowledge, that no one does wrong willingly, and that the soul was more important than the body, challenged conventional thinking in ways that are still revolutionary today. He suggested that at the deepest level, all humans share a common divine nature that connects them to eternal truths. The influence of Socratic philosophy spread far beyond Athens through the work of his disciples. Plato founded the Academy, where Socratic methods were combined with mathematical and metaphysical studies. Aristotle, Plato's student, developed systematic approaches to logic and natural philosophy that would dominate Western thought for centuries. The Stoics, the Cynics, and numerous other schools all trace their origins back to the man who claimed to know nothing. But perhaps the most enduring mystery of Socrates lies in his ability to transform lives through the simple act of questioning. Those who encountered him described a profound shift in consciousness, a sudden recognition of possibilities they had never imagined. This transformation was not the result of new information being transmitted, but of hidden wisdom being awakened within the soul itself. The Socratic paradox, that wisdom consists in knowing that one knows nothing, points to a profound truth about the nature of consciousness. The moment we think we have grasped ultimate reality, we close ourselves off from the infinite mystery that surrounds us. True wisdom remains always open, always questioning, always ready to be surprised by new depths of understanding. As you settle deeper into the quiet of the night, let the gentle wisdom of Socrates accompany you into sleep. His questions echo still in the silence. Who am I? What is the good life? How should I live? These are not problems to be solved, but invitations to ongoing discovery, reminders that the deepest truths are not found in books or lectures, but in the careful examination of our own experience. The Agora of Athens lies in ruins now, but the spirit of Socratic inquiry lives on wherever humans gather to question, to seek, and to wonder. In the quiet space between waking and sleeping, perhaps you can hear his voice still, gentle and persistent, inviting you to look more deeply, to question more honestly, and to recognize the divine spark that burns within every human soul. The mystery of Socrates reminds us that the greatest wisdom often comes disguised as ignorance, that the most profound teachings emerge from questions rather than answers, and that the path to truth begins with the courage to admit how little we really know. In that admission lies the beginning of all genuine understanding, the first step on the eternal journey toward wisdom. Our path through the mysteries of ancient Greece now leads us to the sacred island of Delos, floating like a jewel in the azure waters of the Aegean Sea. Here, According to ancient legend, the god Apollo and his twin sister Artemis were born, and here the Greeks established one of their most important religious centers. But Delos held secrets that went far beyond its role as Apollo's birthplace, mysteries that connected it to the deepest currents of ancient spirituality. The island itself seemed touched by divine power. Rising from the sea like a vision of paradise, its white marble temples gleaming in the Mediterranean sun, Delos was said to be the most sacred spot in all the Greek world. No one was allowed to be born or die on the island, for it was considered too holy to be touched by the ordinary processes of mortal existence. This prohibition created a unique atmosphere where the eternal seemed to touch the temporal, where the divine and human worlds intersected in ways that could be felt but not fully understood. The annual festivals of Delos drew pilgrims from across the Greek world. They came not just to honor Apollo, but to participate in mysteries that promised to reveal the hidden harmonies of existence. The island became a living temple, its every stone and spring invested with sacred meaning. Processions of white-robed initiates would wind through the sacred precincts, their voices rising in hymns that seemed to make the very air vibrate with divine presence. At the heart of these celebrations lay the Delian League, not merely a political alliance, but a sacred confederation bound together by shared religious obligations. The member cities sent not only tribute, but also choruses of their finest singers and dancers, creating performances that were said to mirror the harmonies of the celestial spheres. These festivals were more than entertainment. They were cosmic rituals designed to maintain the balance between heaven and earth. The mysteries of Delos were intimately connected with the cycles of the sun and moon. Apollo, as the god of light and prophecy, represented the solar principle, the power of consciousness to illuminate truth and dispel darkness. The island's temples were oriented to catch the first rays of dawn, and the sacred rituals were timed to coincide with the sun's movement through the sky. This was not mere symbolism, but a practical technology for aligning human consciousness with cosmic rhythms. The sacred lake at the center of the island was said to be the spot where Leto, pregnant with the divine twins, finally found refuge after wandering the world in search of a place to give birth. The lake was surrounded by palm trees that never died, their fronds rustling with what pilgrims swore was the voice of the god himself. Here, in the stillness of the sacred waters, initiates would come to receive visions and prophetic dreams. The treasury of Delos contained offerings from across the ancient world, golden statues, precious gems, and artifacts of such beauty that they seemed to glow with inner light. But more mysterious still were the sacred objects whose true nature was known only to the highest initiates. These included the omphalos, or navel stone, which marked Delos as the center of the world, and various talismans said to possess the power to grant prophetic vision to those who approached them with proper preparation. The priests of Delos were not merely ritual functionaries, but skilled practitioners of sacred arts that combined astronomy, mathematics, music, and medicine. They understood that the human body was a microcosm of the larger universe, and their healing practices sought to restore harmony between the individual and the cosmic order. Their treatments included not only herbal remedies, but also music therapy, using specific scales and rhythms to realign the patient's inner nature with divine harmony. The sacred dances of Delos were particularly renowned throughout the ancient world. These were not mere entertainment, but precisely choreographed rituals that embodied cosmic principles. The dancers moved in patterns that mirrored the movements of the planets, their steps marking out sacred geometries that connected Earth to heaven. Participants described entering trance states where they felt themselves become part of the eternal dance of creation itself. The Oracle of Delos, while less famous than its counterpart at Delphi, was known for the unusual clarity of its prophecies. Where the Pythia at Delphi spoke in riddles and metaphors, the Delian oracle delivered messages that were both precise and practical. This difference reflected the distinct nature of Apollo's presence on the island. not the wild, ecstatic inspiration of Delphi, but the clear, harmonious wisdom of divine reason. The island's unique position in the Aegean made it a natural meeting place for diverse spiritual traditions. Egyptian priests brought their knowledge of stellar cycles and sacred geometry. Phoenician merchants shared their understanding of navigation and commerce as spiritual practices. Persian magi contributed their wisdom about the eternal struggle between light and darkness. This cultural synthesis created a unique form of spirituality that transcended national boundaries. The mysteries of Delos included elaborate initiation rituals that took place in underground chambers beneath the main temple. Candidates would descend into these sacred spaces, symbolically dying to their ordinary consciousness and being reborn as servants of the divine light. The process included purification ceremonies, instruction in sacred mathematics, and vision quests that were said to reveal the initiate's true spiritual nature. The decline of Delos began with the rise of Roman power in the Mediterranean. The Romans, while respectful of Greek religious traditions, lacked the deep spiritual understanding that had sustained the island's mysteries. Gradually, the sacred festivals became mere spectacles. The initiations lost their transformative power, and the island's role as a spiritual center faded into memory. Yet the influence of Delian spirituality extended far beyond the island itself. The concept of Apollo as the god of harmony and proportion would profoundly influence Renaissance art and architecture. The Delian League's vision of cities united by shared spiritual purpose would inspire later attempts at international cooperation. Even the island's mathematical and astronomical knowledge would contribute to the development of modern science. The archaeological remains of Delos still draw visitors today, though few understand the profound spiritual significance of what they are seeing. The marble columns and broken statues are not merely artistic achievements, but physical expressions of a worldview that saw beauty as the visible manifestation of divine truth. The island's ruins speak of a time when humans believed that the material and spiritual worlds were one, when art and science and religion were simply different aspects of a single quest for understanding. As the night deepens and your breathing slows, let the sacred harmonies of Delos carry you towards sleep. Imagine the ancient processions winding through the marble temples, the voices of the choruses rising to greet the dawn, the sacred dances that connected earth to heaven. In the gentle rhythm of waves against the shore, perhaps you can still hear the music of the spheres that the ancients believed played constantly throughout the cosmos. The mysteries of Delos remind us that the sacred is not separate from the beautiful, that truth and harmony are intimately connected, and that the human soul has a natural capacity for divine communion. In the quiet of the night, as consciousness fades and dreams begin, maybe you can sense that eternal harmony still playing, inviting you to join the cosmic dance that has been going on since the beginning of time. The island of Delos sleeps now beneath the Aegean stars, but its spirit lives on in every moment of beauty, every flash of insight, every recognition that we are part of something infinitely larger and more wonderful than ourselves. In the gentle drift towards sleep, perhaps you can feel that ancient connection awakening, reminding you that you too are a note in the eternal symphony, a spark of the divine light that first blazed forth on that sacred island so long ago. From the sun-blessed shores of Delos, our journey through the mysteries of ancient Greece takes us to the misty mountains of northern Greece, where the god Dionysus held sway over rites so wild and transformative that they seemed to blur the very boundaries between human and divine. These were the Dionysiac mysteries, celebrations of ecstasy and renewal that promised not just spiritual transformation, but actual communion with the god of wine, madness, and divine intoxication. The worship of Dionysus was unlike anything else in the Greek religious world, where other gods demanded reverence and careful ritual observance. Dionysus called his followers to abandon themselves completely, to surrender their ordinary consciousness and become vessels for divine possession. The god himself embodied paradox. He was both destroyer and creator, bringer of madness and revealer of truth, the force that dissolved civilized boundaries and revealed the wild divinity that lay beneath the surface of human nature. The seasonal festivals of Dionysus were timed to coincide with the cycles of the vine, connecting the god's worship with the most fundamental rhythms of agricultural life. In spring, when the new wine was first tasted, and in autumn, when the grapes were harvested and pressed, communities throughout Greece would gather to celebrate the god's return to the world. These were not solemn ceremonies, but explosions of joy and liberation that could last for days. The participants in these festivals were primarily women, who formed groups called theosoi and retreated to the mountains to worship their god in wild freedom. They would dress in fawn skins and ivy crowns, carry thyrsus wands topped with pine cones, and dance with such abandon that witnesses described them as having been transformed into something more than human. In their ecstatic state, they were said to possess supernatural strength, the ability to tear wild animals apart with their bare hands, and the power to make milk and honey flow from the earth. These mountain retreats were not mere parties, but profound spiritual experiences that offered women a temporary escape from the constraints of ordinary Greek society. In the grip of divine madness, social hierarchies dissolved, and slaves and aristocrats danced together as equals. The boundaries between human and animal, civilization and wilderness, self and other, seemed to melt away in the intoxicating presence of the god. The central mystery of Dionysiac worship was the experience of divine possession itself. Unlike the controlled inspiration of the Delphic oracle, Dionysiac ecstasy was wild, unpredictable, and transformative. Participants described feeling their individual consciousness dissolve and merge with the god, experiencing a union so complete that they became, for a time, divine themselves. This was not metaphor, but lived reality, a genuine alteration of consciousness that left participants forever changed. The rituals included elements that seemed designed to break down the barriers between different levels of reality. Sacred dramas were performed that reenacted the god's mythical death and resurrection, with participants taking on the roles of the divine characters. The consumption of wine was not mere drinking, but a sacramental act that opened the doors of perception and allowed the divine to enter human consciousness. Even the setting, wild mountainsides far from the ordered spaces of the city, contributed to the dissolution of ordinary boundaries. The mythology surrounding Dionysus reflected the transformative nature of his worship. He was said to have been born twice, once from his mother Semele, who was destroyed by the full glory of Zeus, and again from Zeus's own thigh, where the unborn child had been sewn after being rescued from his mother's womb. This double birth symbolized the dual nature of Dionysiac experience, the destruction of ordinary consciousness and the rebirth into divine awareness. The god's travels through the ancient world, bringing his worship to different lands and peoples, mirrored the spread of his mysteries throughout the Mediterranean. Wherever Dionysus went, he encountered resistance from those who feared the transformative power of his worship. Kings and priests who tried to suppress his rites were driven mad or destroyed, for the god's power could not be contained by human authority. The Dionysiac mysteries included secret teachings about the nature of death and rebirth that paralleled those of other mystery cults. Initiates learned that the individual soul was not separate from the divine, but was itself a fragment of the cosmic consciousness that Dionysus embodied. Death was not an ending, but a transformation, a dissolution of the illusory boundaries that separated the soul from its divine source. The sacred objects associated with Dionysiac worship were designed to facilitate this transformation of consciousness. The thyrsus wand, with its pine cone tip, was said to channel the god's power and induce visionary states. the ivy crown connected the wearer to the eternal life force that flowed through all growing things. The wine cup was not merely a vessel for drinking, but a sacred implement that enabled communion with the divine. The theatrical aspects of Dionysiac worship would eventually evolve into the great dramatic festivals of Athens, where tragedy and comedy both had their origins in the god's rites. The masks worn by actors were originally ritual objects that allowed participants to take on different identities and experience the fluid nature of the self. The cathartic effect of tragic drama, its ability to purge the audience of strong emotions, was a civilized form of the transformation that occurred in the wild mountain celebrations.
Yet,
The influence of Dionysiac mysteries extended far beyond their original Greek context. The Roman Bacchanalia, though eventually suppressed by the Senate, showed how the god's worship could spread and adapt to new cultural environments. Early Christian writers, while officially condemning pagan practices, often borrowed imagery and concepts from Dionysiac tradition, particularly the themes of death, resurrection, and divine communion. The psychological insights embedded in Dionysiac worship were remarkably sophisticated. The ancient Greeks understood that the human psyche contained both civilized and wild elements, and that psychological health required finding ways to honor both aspects of human nature. The periodic festivals of Dionysus provided a sanctioned outlet for the expression of emotions and drives that were normally suppressed, preventing them from building up to destructive levels. The ecological wisdom of Dionysiac worship is equally relevant today. The god's association with the vine and the cycles of growth and decay reflected a deep understanding of humanity's connection to the natural world. His worship reminded participants that they were not separate from nature, but part of its eternal rhythms of death and renewal. As the night deepens and your consciousness begins to drift, let the wild music of Dionysus carry you towards sleep. Imagine the ancient processions winding through moonlit forests, the voices of the worshippers rising in ecstatic song, the sacred dances that dissolve the boundaries between self and cosmos. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, perhaps you can still hear the primal music that called the ancients to abandon their ordinary selves and embrace the divine madness that leads to truth. The mysteries of Dionysus remind us that transformation requires a willingness to let go of what we think we know, to surrender our carefully constructed identities and open ourselves to forces greater than our individual will. In the quiet of the night, as the boundaries between waking and sleeping blur, maybe you can sense that ancient invitation still calling, offering you the chance to taste the divine intoxication that dissolves all fear and reveals the wild joy that lies at the heart of existence. The mountain groves where the ancient Thiasoi danced are silent now, but the spirit of Dionysus lives on in every moment of genuine ecstasy, every experience of losing oneself in something greater, every recognition that the boundaries we think separate us from the divine are ultimately illusory. In the gentle drift towards sleep, perhaps you can feel that ancient wildness stirring, reminding you that you too are part of the eternal dance of creation and destruction, death and rebirth that has been going on since the beginning of time. Our journey through the mysteries of ancient Greece now carries us to the sacred island of Kos, where healing and wisdom intertwined in ways that modern medicine is only beginning to understand. Here, in the shadow of Mount Dikaios, where the morning mist clung to olive groves, and the sea whispered ancient secrets against weathered stones, the god of healing established his most revered sanctuary. This was not merely a place of medical treatment, but a temple of transformation, where the boundaries between body and spirit, illness and enlightenment, dissolved in the gentle embrace of divine healing. The sanctuary of Asclepius on Kos was unlike any other healing center in the ancient world. Where modern medicine sees disease as mechanical failure to be corrected, The ancient Greeks understood illness as a disruption of the harmony between human consciousness and cosmic order. The priests of Asclepius, known as the Asclepiadae, were not merely physicians, but spiritual guides who understood that true healing required addressing the whole person, not just the symptoms of disease. The approach to healing began long before patients reached the sanctuary itself. The journey to Kos was considered part of the therapeutic process, a pilgrimage that allowed the mind to shift from the ordinary concerns of daily life to the deeper rhythms of healing. Pilgrims would travel by ship across the wine-dark Aegean, leaving behind the familiar landscapes of their homes and opening themselves to the transformative power of the sacred island. Upon arrival, patients underwent extensive purification rituals designed to prepare them for divine intervention. They would bathe in the sacred springs that bubbled up from the earth, their waters said to carry the healing power of the god himself. They would fast for prescribed periods, cleansing their bodies of the accumulated toxins of ordinary life. They would participate in ritual processions around the sanctuary, their footsteps wearing smooth the marble paths that countless other seekers had walked before them. The central practice of Asclepian healing was the sacred sleep, known as incubation. Patients would spend the night in the abaton, a long colonnade where they would lie on simple couches, wrapped in the soft wool of sacrificial animals. In this liminal space between waking and sleeping, between human and divine consciousness, they would await the appearance of the god in their dreams. Asclepius would come to them in visions, sometimes as a bearded physician carrying a staff entwined with serpents, sometimes as a radiant youth whose very presence brought healing, sometimes as a gentle voice offering guidance for their recovery. The dreams that came to patients in the abaton were not ordinary nightmares or fantasies, but profound encounters with healing wisdom. Some reported surgical procedures performed by divine hands, operations that left no scars, but completely cured their ailments. Others received prescriptions for herbs, exercises, or dietary changes that would restore their health. Still others were given insights into the emotional or spiritual roots of their illness, understanding that allowed them to address the deeper causes of their suffering. The priests who interpreted these healing dreams were skilled in what we might now call holistic medicine. They understood that the symbols and imagery that appeared in patients' visions contained practical information about treatment, but they also recognized that the healing process itself was as important as the cure. The act of opening oneself to divine guidance, of surrendering control and trusting in a wisdom greater than human understanding, was itself profoundly therapeutic. The sanctuary grounds were designed to support this healing process through every detail of their construction. Gardens filled with medicinal plants provided both practical remedies and sensory experiences that calmed the mind and lifted the spirit. Sacred groves offered quiet spaces for contemplation and prayer. The theatre carved into the hillside hosted performances that were understood to have therapeutic value, using music, poetry, and drama to restore emotional balance and inspire hope. The medical library of Kos was renowned throughout the ancient world as a repository of healing wisdom. Here, the priests preserved not only their own observations and treatments, but also knowledge gathered from across the Mediterranean. Egyptian techniques for setting bones, Mesopotamian understanding of herbal medicines, Thracian wisdom about the healing power of music, all were integrated into a comprehensive system of care that treated each patient as a unique individual, rather than a collection of symptoms. The training of the Asclepiadae was itself a mystery tradition, passed down through generations of healing families who guarded their knowledge carefully. Young priests would spend years learning not just the practical skills of medicine, but also the spiritual disciplines that allowed them to serve as intermediaries between human suffering and divine healing. They studied astronomy and mathematics, understanding that the movements of celestial bodies influenced the timing of treatments. They learned music and poetry, recognizing that beauty itself was a form of medicine that could heal the soul. The therapeutic practices of Kos extended far beyond the treatment of physical ailments. The priests understood that many illnesses had psychological or spiritual roots, and they developed sophisticated methods for addressing these deeper causes. They used dream interpretation, not just for diagnosis, but for helping patients understand the symbolic language of their own unconscious minds. They employed ritual drama to help individuals work through traumatic experiences. They prescribed pilgrimages to sacred sites, understanding that the journey itself could be transformative. The sacred serpents that lived in the sanctuary were not mere symbols, but active participants in the healing process. These non-venomous snakes were allowed to move freely through the abaton, and their presence was considered a sign of the god's blessing. Patients who were touched by a serpent during their sacred sleep often reported miraculous cures, as if the ancient wisdom of the earth itself had flowed into their bodies through the serpent's touch. The influence of Kos extended far beyond the island itself, through the network of Asclepian sanctuaries that spread throughout the Greek world. Each healing center adapted the basic practices to local conditions and needs, but all shared the fundamental understanding that healing required addressing the whole person within the context of their relationship to the divine cosmos. This holistic approach to medicine would eventually influence the development of modern therapeutic practices, though often without acknowledgement of its ancient origins. The ethical teachings associated with Asclepian healing were equally revolutionary. The famous Hippocratic Oath, though attributed to Hippocrates of Kos, actually emerged from the broader tradition of the Asclepiadae. The principles it enshrined: to do no harm, to maintain patient confidentiality, to refuse payment for certain treatments, reflected our understanding of medicine as a sacred calling rather than merely a profession. The decline of the Asclepian mysteries paralleled the broader transformation of the ancient world. As rationalistic approaches to medicine gained prominence, the spiritual dimensions of healing were increasingly marginalized. The rise of Christianity, while incorporating some elements of divine healing, rejected the polytheistic framework that had sustained the Asclepian tradition. The sacred serpents were killed, the dream chambers were closed, and the holistic understanding of health and illness was gradually forgotten. Yet the wisdom of Kos continues to resonate in modern approaches to healing that recognize the importance of treating the whole person rather than just the disease. The placebo effect, the healing power of positive expectation, the importance of the doctor-patient relationship, all these contemporary insights echo the ancient understanding that healing involves more than just physical intervention. As the night deepens and your body settles into the rhythms of rest, let the healing wisdom of Kos flow gently through your consciousness. Imagine yourself lying in the sacred abaton, surrounded by the soft sounds of the Aegean night. Feel the ancient stones beneath you, worn smooth by countless pilgrims who came seeking healing. In the gentle darkness, perhaps you can sense the presence of the healing god, not as a distant deity, but as the natural wisdom of your own body. The innate capacity for renewal and restoration that flows through every cell. The mysteries of Asclepius remind us that healing is not something that happens to us, but something that emerges from within us when we create the right conditions for transformation. In the quiet of the night, as your breathing slows and your muscles relax, maybe you can feel that ancient healing power stirring, the same force that brought hope to countless pilgrims who walked the marble paths of Kos in search of wholeness. The sanctuary of Asclepius sleeps now beneath the Mediterranean stars, but its spirit lives on in every moment of genuine healing, every recognition that we are more than just physical bodies, every understanding that true wellness requires harmony between all aspects of our being. In the gentle drift towards sleep, perhaps you can feel that ancient blessing awakening, reminding you that you carry within yourself the same healing power that the ancients sought in their sacred dreams, waiting to be activated by faith hope, and the quiet surrender that allows transformation to unfold. From the healing sanctuary of Kos, our journey through the mysteries of ancient Greece leads us to the remote highlands of Arcadia, where Pan, the god of wild nature, held court among shepherds and mountain nymphs. Here, in valleys where the morning mist clung to ancient oak trees, and the sound of distant pipes echoed across flower-strewn meadows, the Greeks encountered something that both terrified and enchanted them: the raw, untamed power of the natural world itself. The worship of Pan was unlike any other religious practice in the ancient world. There were no grand temples, no formal priesthood, no elaborate rituals. Instead, his devotees gathered in sacred groves and hidden caves, in places where the boundary between civilization and wilderness seemed to dissolve. The god himself was said to appear suddenly to solitary travelers, filling them with the wild fear that bears his name, panic, or inspiring them with the ecstatic joy of complete communion with nature. The Arcadian mysteries were not organized cults, but spontaneous revelations that occurred when humans opened themselves fully to the natural world. Shepherds watching their flocks in the high pastures would speak of hearing the god's pipes at twilight, melodies so beautiful and strange that they seemed to come from the earth itself. Hunters pursuing deer through ancient forests would catch glimpses of a figure dancing among the trees, half man and half goat, embodying the wild vitality that pulsed through all living things. The experience of encountering Pan was described as both terrifying and transformative. Those who met him spoke of feeling their ordinary consciousness dissolve, replaced by an awareness that was simultaneously more primitive and more profound than human thought. They described sensing the hidden life that flowed through stones and streams, feeling the ancient memories that slumbered in the roots of trees, understanding the secret language that all wild creatures spoke among themselves. The god's physical appearance reflected his dual nature as both civilized and wild. From the waist up, he appeared as a handsome man with the wisdom of ages in his eyes. From the waist down, he possessed the legs and hooves of a goat, connecting him to the animal kingdom and the untamed fertility of the earth. His horns marked him as a creature of the liminal spaces, neither fully human nor entirely beast, but something that transcended both categories. The sacred sites associated with Pan were places where the natural world seemed to concentrate its power. Mountain caves where underground streams emerged into daylight, groves where ancient trees grew in perfect circles, meadows where wildflowers bloomed in patterns that seemed too perfect to be accidental. These locations were not built by human hands, but recognized by sensitive souls as places where the veil between worlds grew thin. The mythology surrounding Pan was rich with stories of transformation and revelation. He was said to have invented the syrinx, or panpipes, after falling in love with a nymph who transformed herself into a stand of reeds to escape his pursuit. Rather than being discouraged by her rejection, Pan cut the reeds and fashioned them into the instrument that would become his signature, creating beauty from loss and music from separation. This story embodied the Arcadian understanding that even disappointment and failure could be transformed into sources of wisdom and joy. The pastoral poetry that emerged from Arcadia reflected the profound spiritual insights that came from living in close communion with nature. The shepherds who tended their flocks in the high meadows developed a sophisticated understanding of natural cycles, weather patterns, and the subtle signs that indicated the health of the land. This practical knowledge was inseparable from their spiritual awareness, creating a worldview that saw the divine not as separate from nature, but as its very essence. The seasonal festivals associated with Pan were timed to coincide with the natural rhythms of the agricultural year. At the spring equinox, when the earth awakened from its winter sleep, shepherds would gather to celebrate the return of fertility to the land. At the autumn harvest, they would offer thanks for the abundance that the earth had provided. These celebrations were not formal ceremonies, but spontaneous expressions of joy that could last for days, with music, dancing, and storytelling that went on until the participants collapsed from exhaustion. The prophetic traditions of Arcadia were based on the belief that Pan could reveal the future to those who learned to listen to the voices of the natural world. Shepherds would interpret the flight patterns of birds, the behavior of their animals, the way the wind moved through the trees. They developed a form of divination that was less about predicting specific events than about understanding the underlying patterns and forces that shaped all existence. The therapeutic practices associated with Pan's worship were remarkably sophisticated. The god was believed to be able to heal both physical ailments and psychological disorders, particularly those that arose from being cut off from nature. His followers developed treatments that involved spending extended periods in wild places, allowing the natural world to restore balance to minds and bodies that had been damaged by the artificiality of civilized life. The musical traditions of Arcadia were central to the worship of Pan. The god's pipes were said to be able to induce trance states, heal the sick, and even control the weather. Shepherds would spend years learning to play these instruments, not just as entertainment, but as a form of spiritual practice. The music they created was believed to be a direct channel to the divine, a way of participating in the eternal song that the natural world sang to itself. The influence of Arcadian spirituality extended far beyond the mountainous regions where it originated. The pastoral ideal that it embodied would inspire poets, artists, and philosophers for centuries to come. The concept of the noble savage, the idea that humans are naturally good and are corrupted only by civilization, can be traced back to the Arcadian understanding of Pan as the embodiment of uncorrupted natural wisdom. The decline of Pan's worship was both gradual and symbolic. As urbanization spread and humans became increasingly separated from the natural world, the god's presence seemed to fade. The famous story of the death of Pan, reported by Plutarch, told of a ship's pilot who heard a voice crying across the waters, "Great Pan is dead." This was interpreted by early Christians as a sign that the old gods were giving way to the new faith. But it might also be understood as a lament for the loss of humanity's connection to the wild. Yet the spirit of Pan never truly died. In every moment when humans feel the wild call of untamed nature, in every experience of finding peace and renewal in natural settings, in every recognition that we are not separate from the earth but part of its living system, the god of Arcadia lives on. His mysteries are not hidden in ancient texts, but written in the language of wind and water, growth and decay, the eternal dance of life that continues all around us. As the night deepens and your breathing synchronizes with the ancient rhythms of sleep, let the wild music of Pan carry you toward rest. Imagine yourself in a moonlit Arcadian meadow, where the scent of wild herbs fills the air and the sound of distant pipes echoes across the valley. In the gentle darkness, perhaps you can sense the presence of the god himself, not as a fearsome deity, but as the natural wisdom that flows through all living things, the wild joy that bubbles up from the earth itself. The mysteries of Pan remind us that we are not separate from nature, but part of its eternal dance, not civilized beings who have conquered the wild, but wild beings who have temporarily forgotten our true nature. In the quiet of the night, as consciousness fades and dreams begin, maybe you can feel that ancient wildness stirring, the same force that inspired the shepherds of Arcadia to dance beneath the stars and play their pipes until dawn. The mountains of Arcadia sleep now beneath the Mediterranean stars, but the spirit of Pan lives on in every moment of genuine connection with the natural world, every recognition that we are part of something infinitely larger and more wonderful than our individual selves. In the gentle drift towards sleep, perhaps you can feel that ancient blessing awakening, reminding you that you too are a child of the earth, a note in the eternal symphony of life that has been playing since the beginning of time. Our journey through the mysteries of ancient Greece now brings us to the sacred island of Samothrace, where the great gods offered their protection to those who sought it with sincere hearts. Rising from the dark waters of the northern Aegean like a vision from another world, this mysterious island held secrets that even the most learned scholars of antiquity could not fully comprehend. Here, in ceremonies that promised safety from the perils of the sea and the storms of life, initiates experienced something that transformed their understanding of divine protection and human vulnerability. The approach to Samothrace was itself a spiritual experience. The island's towering peaks, often shrouded in clouds and mist, seemed to reach toward the heavens themselves. Ancient sailors would catch sight of these heights from miles away, their hearts quickening with anticipation and reverence. The very difficulty of reaching the island, the treacherous currents, the unpredictable winds, the rocky shores that could dash unwary ships to pieces, seemed to test the sincerity of those who sought initiation into its mysteries. The great gods of Samothrace were ancient beyond memory, their names lost in the mists of pre-Greek tradition. They were not the familiar deities of the Olympic pantheon, but primal forces that governed the fundamental powers of existence: birth and death, protection and destruction, the eternal dance between order and chaos. The Greeks who came to worship them understood that they were encountering something far older and more mysterious than their own religious traditions. The initiation ceremonies of Samothrace were unique in the ancient world for their radical inclusivity. Unlike other mystery cults that excluded slaves, foreigners, or women, the great gods welcomed all who approached them with genuine need. Rich and poor, free and enslaved, Greek and barbarian, all were equal before the ancient powers that ruled the island. This democratic approach to divine protection reflected a profound understanding that the forces of nature recognized no human distinctions. The rituals began with a confession that was unlike anything else in Greek religion. Candidates for initiation were required to reveal their worst sin, not for forgiveness, but for purification. This was not a gentle absolution, but a searing exposure of the hidden guilt that could block the flow of divine protection. The confession was made publicly before the assembled community of initiates, creating a bond of shared vulnerability that transcended ordinary social barriers. The sacred washing that followed the confession was performed in springs that bubbled up from the island's heart, waters that were said to carry the blessing of the great gods themselves. The initiates would immerse themselves completely, allowing the sacred waters to cleanse not just their bodies, but their souls. Many reported experiencing visions during this purification, glimpses of the divine realm that awaited those who had been truly cleansed of their spiritual burdens. The central mystery of Samothrace was revealed in the great circular building known as the Arsinoion, one of the largest roofed structures in the ancient world. Here, in the flickering light of sacred flames, the initiates witnessed dramatic presentations that reenacted the primordial struggles between the forces of creation and destruction. These were not mere theatrical performances, but ritual dramas that seemed to make the cosmic powers themselves present in the sacred space. The iron rings that marked the successful completion of initiation were more than mere symbols. They were believed to carry the actual protection of the great gods, creating an invisible shield around the wearer that could turn aside the most dangerous threats. Ships carrying initiated crew members were said to be preserved from storms and pirates. Merchants who wore the sacred rings prospered in their ventures. Even warriors found that the protection of the great gods could turn the tide of battle in their favor. The language of the Samothracian mysteries was as mysterious as the gods themselves. The ceremonies were conducted in multiple tongues, Greek, Thracian, and dialects that scholars could not identify. This linguistic diversity reflected the international character of the cult, but it also suggested that the truths being revealed transcended the limitations of any single language. The initiates learned to understand each other not through words, but through the shared experience of divine encounter. The sacred meals that concluded the initiation were communion ceremonies that created lasting bonds between the participants. The food was simple: bread, wine, and fruits from the island's gardens. But it was consecrated by the presence of the great gods and the shared experience of the initiates. Many reported that these meals had a transformative effect, creating a sense of connection not just with their fellow initiates, but with the cosmic forces that governed all existence. The therapeutic aspects of Samothracian initiation were remarkable. Many who came to the island seeking protection from external dangers discovered that their greatest enemies were internal, the fears, guilts, and anxieties that had been poisoning their lives. The process of confession, purification, and ritual participation seemed to heal these psychological wounds, creating a sense of peace and confidence that protected the initiates more effectively than any physical armor. The island's connection to the sea made it a natural center for the protection of travelers and merchants. The sacred harbor was considered inviolable, a place where even enemies could meet in safety. Ships flying the flags of warring nations could anchor side by side, their crews protected by the peace of the great gods. This sanctuary tradition would later influence the development of international law and the concept of neutral waters. The influence of Samothracian mysteries extended far beyond the island itself. The concept of divine protection earned through ritual participation would spread throughout the Mediterranean world, influencing the development of later mystery religions. The idea that confession and purification could cleanse the soul and attract divine favor would find echoes in Christian sacramental theology. Even the democratic inclusivity of the Samothracian rites would contribute to the development of more egalitarian religious movements. The mystery teachings of Samothrace included sophisticated understanding of natural forces that modern science is only beginning to appreciate. The initiates learned to read the signs of approaching storms, to understand the hidden currents that moved beneath the sea's surface, to recognize the subtle indicators that revealed the health of the natural world. This knowledge was not separate from their spiritual understanding, but integrated into a comprehensive worldview that saw the divine as manifesting through natural processes. The decline of the Samothracian mysteries came gradually, as the Mediterranean world changed and the need for divine protection from the dangers of the sea seemed less urgent. The rise of Rome, with its powerful navy and well-protected trade routes, reduced the perils that had originally driven people to seek the favor of the great gods. The spread of Christianity, with its promise of universal salvation, gradually replaced the older mysteries that had served specific communities and needs. Yet the spirit of Samothrace endures in the human recognition that we are not isolated individuals struggling alone against an indifferent universe. The island's mysteries taught that protection comes not from our own strength, but from our connection to forces greater than ourselves. That safety is found not in isolation, but in community. That the divine protection we seek is already present, waiting to be activated by sincere confession and genuine purification. As the night deepens and your consciousness settles into the rhythms of rest, let the ancient protection of the great gods surround you like a gentle embrace. Imagine yourself on the sacred shores of Samothrace, where the waves whisper eternal promises of safety and the iron rings of the initiated gleam in the moonlight. In the darkness, perhaps you can feel the presence of those ancient powers, not as distant deities, but as the natural forces of protection and healing that flow through all existence. The mysteries of Samothrace remind us that true protection comes not from avoiding danger, but from facing it with a purified heart and a connection to something greater than ourselves. In the quiet of the night, as fear and anxiety dissolve in the gentle embrace of sleep, maybe you can sense that ancient blessing still available, offering you the same protection that was promised to the initiates of old, not immunity from the storms of life, but the strength and wisdom to navigate them safely. The sacred springs of Samothrace still bubble up from the island's heart, carrying the blessing of the great gods across the centuries. In their eternal flow, perhaps you can hear the promise that was made to every initiate, that no one who seeks sincerely will be left to face the dangers of existence alone, that the protection we need is already present, waiting to be activated by the simple act of opening our hearts to the mystery that surrounds us. Our journey through the mysteries of ancient Greece carries us now to the windswept shores of Aegina, where the temple of Aphaea stood sentinel over the Saronic Gulf. Here, where the salt breeze carried the scent of wild thyme, and the olive groves whispered secrets to the evening stars, the Greeks encountered a goddess whose very name has been lost to time, yet whose presence still haunts the marble ruins that crown the island's highest hill. Aphaea was not one of the familiar deities of Mount Olympus, but something far more ancient and mysterious. Her name, meaning the invisible one, spoke to her nature as a goddess of hidden things, of secrets that could only be revealed to those who approached her with the proper reverence and understanding. She was associated with the hunt, with the moon's mysterious cycles, and with the liminal spaces where the mortal world touched the divine. The temple itself was a masterpiece of ancient architecture, its columns rising like prayers carved in stone against the azure sky. Built from the local limestone that gleamed golden in the Mediterranean sun, it commanded a view that stretched across the wine-dark waters to the distant peaks of Attica. Sailors approaching the island would see its silhouette first, a beacon that promised safe harbor and divine protection to those who honored the goddess properly. The worship of Aphaea was intimately connected to the rhythms of the natural world. Her festivals were timed to coincide with the phases of the moon, particularly the new moon when her invisible presence was strongest. On these nights, when darkness cloaked the island and only the stars provided light, her devotees would gather in the sacred grove that surrounded the temple, their white robes ghostly in the starlight. The rituals began at sunset with the lighting of sacred fires that would burn throughout the night. The flames were kindled not with ordinary means, but with the ancient fire-making techniques that connected the worshippers to their ancestors. The smoke rose straight and true in the still evening air, carrying the prayers of the faithful to the goddess who dwelt in the spaces between the visible and invisible worlds. The priestesses of Aphaea were chosen for their ability to perceive things that remained hidden from ordinary sight. They were trained from childhood in the arts of divination, herbalism, and the interpretation of dreams. Their initiations took place in the underground chambers beneath the temple, where they would spend 3 days and nights in darkness, learning to see with inner vision and to hear the goddess's voice in the silence between their own heartbeats. The sacred hunt that formed the centerpiece of Aphaea's worship was unlike any other ritual in the ancient world. The participants would gather at dawn, their faces painted with sacred symbols and their hair crowned with wreaths of myrtle and laurel. They would process through the island's forests, not to kill any living creature, but to track the invisible prey that only the goddess could provide. This mystical hunt was a form of moving meditation, a way of attuning consciousness to the subtle signs and hidden patterns that governed all existence. The hunters would follow trails that had no physical markers, pursuing quarry that left no footprints, guided only by their intuition and their connection to the goddess's invisible presence. Those who succeeded in this impossible hunt would return with hands empty but hearts full, bearing the invisible trophy of expanded awareness. The oracle of Aphaea spoke in whispers that seemed to come from the wind itself. Unlike the dramatic pronouncements of other prophetic sites, her messages were subtle, requiring careful attention and patient interpretation. Pilgrims would come to the temple seeking guidance, and the priestesses would lead them through rituals of purification and preparation that could last for days before the goddess would deign to respond. The answers, when they came, were often found not in words, but in signs and synchronicities that unfolded in the days and weeks following the consultation. A particular bird appearing at a crucial moment, a dream that provided the missing piece of a puzzle, a chance encounter that opened unexpected doors. These were the ways that a Faya communicated with those who sought her wisdom. The island's position in the Saronic Gulf made it a natural meeting place for the various mystery traditions of the ancient world. Initiates from Eleusis would come to experience a Faya's hidden teachings. Devotees of Dionysus would find in her worship a complementary understanding of the invisible forces that moved through all existence. The Orphic mysteries, with their emphasis on the soul's hidden divine nature, found natural resonance in the cult of the invisible goddess. The sacred marriage ceremonies that took place at a Faya's temple were renowned throughout the Greek world for their beauty and spiritual power. These were not ordinary weddings, but mystical unions that symbolized the joining of visible and invisible realms. The couples who participated reported that their relationships were blessed with a deep understanding that transcended ordinary human love, a connection that seemed to partake of the goddess's own invisible essence. The therapeutic practices associated with a Faya's worship were particularly effective for ailments that had no visible cause. The goddess was believed to be able to heal the hidden wounds of the soul, the invisible injuries that manifested as physical symptoms without apparent origin. Her healing rituals involved long periods of contemplation in the sacred grove, where patients would learn to perceive the subtle energies that flowed through their bodies and to correct the imbalances that were causing their suffering. The artistic traditions that emerged from a Faya's worship were characterized by their emphasis on suggestion rather than explicit representation. The sculptors who worked on her temple developed techniques for carving marble that seemed to capture movement and emotion in ways that had never been achieved before. Their figures seemed to breathe with invisible life, their eyes holding secrets that viewers could sense but never fully grasp. The musical traditions associated with the goddess were equally subtle and sophisticated. Her hymns were composed in modes that seemed to resonate with frequencies beyond ordinary hearing, creating harmonies that touched the soul directly without passing through the mind. The instruments used in her worship were crafted with special attention to their invisible properties. The wood aged in sacred groves, the strings made from materials that had been blessed by the goddess herself. The philosophical schools that developed around a Faya's worship were concerned with the nature of the invisible world and humanity's relationship to it. They taught that reality consisted of multiple layers, most of which remained hidden from ordinary perception. The goal of philosophical practice was not to accumulate knowledge, but to develop the inner faculties that could perceive these hidden dimensions of existence. The decline of a Faya's worship was gradual and almost imperceptible, like the fading of starlight at dawn. As the ancient world became more concerned with visible achievements and material success, the goddess of hidden things seemed to withdraw from human awareness. Her temple fell into disrepair, her rituals were forgotten, and her very name slipped from memory. Yet something of her presence lingers still in the ruins that crown the hill of Aegina. Visitors often report a sense of being watched by invisible eyes, of hearing whispers in languages they cannot understand, of feeling the presence of something ancient and benevolent that hovers just beyond the edge of perception. The goddess of the invisible has perhaps simply become more invisible, waiting for those who have eyes to see and hearts to understand. As the night deepens and your consciousness begins to merge with the realm of dreams, let the invisible presence of a Faya surround you like a gentle embrace. Feel her protection extending over you like starlight, invisible but real, subtle but powerful. In the darkness behind your closed eyes, perhaps you can sense her ancient wisdom stirring, reminding you that the most important things in life are often the ones we cannot see. The mysteries of a Faya teach us that the invisible world is not separate from the visible, but interpenetrates it at every level. The love that binds hearts together, the inspiration that moves the artist's hand, the intuition that guides the seeker toward truth. These are manifestations of the invisible goddess who dwells in the spaces between ordinary perception and divine awareness. The Temple of a Fire stands silent now beneath the Aegean stars, but her presence continues to bless all who seek to perceive the hidden dimensions of existence. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the quiet beating of your heart, in the subtle dance of thoughts and dreams that carries you towards sleep, perhaps you can feel her invisible touch, guiding you safely through the mysteries of the night toward the dawn of new understanding. From the invisible mysteries of Aegina, our journey carries us to the sacred caves of Mount Ida on the island of Crete, where the infant Zeus was hidden from his father's wrath, and where the Curetes danced their wild dances to mask the sound of the divine child's crying. Here, in the shadowed depths of the earth where stalactites hung like frozen tears and underground streams whispered secrets older than memory, the Greeks encountered mysteries that reach back to the very dawn of civilization. The caves of Ida were not merely geological formations, but sacred wombs where the divine could be born and reborn in endless cycles. The ancient Cretans understood that these underground chambers were portals to the primordial depths of existence, places where the ordinary laws of time and space seemed suspended and where mortals could touch the eternal source from which all gods emerged. The cult of the Idaean Zeus was unlike the worship of the sky god who ruled from Mount Olympus. This was Zeus as the dying and rising god, the divine child who experienced birth, death, and resurrection in an eternal cycle that mirrored the rhythms of the natural world. His worship was ecstatic, primal, and transformative, involving rituals that seemed to dissolve the boundaries between human and divine consciousness. The Curetes, the divine dancers who protected the infant god, were more than mythological figures to the initiates of Ida. They were archetypal forces that could be invoked through ritual dance, divine energies that could possess human dancers and transform them into vessels for cosmic power. The bronze shields they clashed in their wild performances were not just noisemakers, but sacred instruments that created vibrations capable of opening doorways between worlds. The initiation into the Idaean mysteries began with a descent into the sacred cave that was both literal and symbolic. Candidates would make their way down the narrow passages that led into the heart of the mountain, their torches casting dancing shadows on the ancient walls. The journey was treacherous, requiring careful navigation through chambers that seemed to shift and change in the flickering light. At the deepest point of the cave, initiates would encounter the sacred chamber where the infant Zeus was said to have been nursed by the goat Amalthea. Here, surrounded by the eternal silence of the depths, they would participate in rituals that reenacted the god's birth and their own spiritual rebirth. The ceremonies involved the consumption of sacred substances, the performance of ecstatic dances, and the recitation of hymns so ancient that their meaning had been lost to all but the most learned priests. The transformative power of these rituals was legendary throughout the ancient world. Initiates emerged from the caves, claiming to have experienced union with the divine source itself, to have remembered their own eternal nature, and to have gained the ability to perceive the hidden connections that linked all existence. Some reported visions of the cosmic order that governed the universe. Others described encounters with divine beings who revealed the secrets of life and death. The sacred marriage ritual that took place annually in the deepest chamber of the cave was one of the most profound mysteries of the ancient world. A priest and priestess, representing Zeus and Hera, would unite in sacred communion while the assembled initiates performed the wild dance of the Curetes. This was not merely a symbolic ceremony, but a mystical event that was believed to renew the fertility of the earth and ensure the continuation of the cosmic order. The musical traditions associated with the Idaean mysteries were characterized by their hypnotic, trance-inducing qualities. The rhythms were complex and primal, designed to synchronize the dancers' movements with the fundamental frequencies of existence. The instruments used were carefully crafted to resonate with the acoustic properties of the cave, creating sound patterns that seem to emerge from the stone itself. The therapeutic aspects of the Idaean mysteries were particularly concerned with healing the wounds of separation and alienation that plagued human consciousness. The rituals were designed to restore the sense of connection to the divine source that had been lost through the trauma of individual existence. Participants reported that their experience in the cave healed not only their own psychological wounds, but also their relationship with their families, their communities, and the natural world. The astronomical knowledge embedded in the Idaean mysteries was remarkably sophisticated. The priests understood that the cave's orientation aligned with specific stellar configurations, and they timed their most important rituals to coincide with celestial events. The birth of Zeus was celebrated at the winter solstice, when the sun began its journey back toward the light. The sacred marriage took place during the spring equinox, when the forces of growth and renewal were at their peak. The influence of the Idaean mysteries extended far beyond Crete itself. The concept of the dying and rising god would become central to many later religious traditions. The idea that divinity could be born from the depths of the earth rather than descending from the heavens would influence the development of chthonic mystery cults throughout the Mediterranean. Even the wild, ecstatic nature of the curettes' dance would find echoes in the later worship of Dionysus and other gods of transformation. The gradual decline of the Idaean mysteries reflected the broader changes that were transforming the ancient world. As Greek civilization became more rational and systematic, the primal, ecstatic elements of the older religion seemed increasingly foreign and uncomfortable. The caves were abandoned, the rituals forgotten, and the wild dances of the curettes became mere legends told to children. Yet something of the ancient power still lingers in the depths of Mount Ida. Modern visitors to the caves often report profound experiences of connection and transformation, as if the sacred energies that once flowed through these chambers have never truly departed. The stone walls seem to pulse with invisible life, and the silence holds echoes of ancient hymns and the rhythm of bronze shields clashing in eternal dance. As the night grows deeper and your consciousness prepares for its own journey into the depths of sleep, let the ancient mysteries of Ida surround you with their protective power. Feel yourself descending into the sacred cave of rest, where the boundaries between waking and sleeping, between self and cosmos, dissolve in the gentle darkness. In the silence of the night, perhaps you can hear the distant sound of bronze shields clashing. The curettes still dancing their eternal dance to protect the divine child that sleeps within every human heart. The mysteries of Ida remind us that the deepest truths are often found not in the heights of intellectual achievement, but in the depths of direct experience. The cave of the heart, where the divine child of consciousness is born and reborn in every moment, is always available to those who are willing to descend into the darkness and trust in the transformative power of the ancient rhythms that still pulse through the depths of existence. The sacred caves of Mount Ida sleep now in the Cretan darkness, but their mysteries continue to unfold in the depths of every human soul. In the gentle descent towards sleep, perhaps you can feel the ancient protection of the curettes surrounding you, their wild dance creating a sacred space where transformation can unfold safely, where the divine child of your own deepest nature can be born again in the silence of the night. As our journey through the mysteries of ancient Greece draws toward its gentle close, we find ourselves standing at the threshold between the ancient world and the realm of dreams, where the boundaries between history and legend dissolve like morning mist over the wine-dark sea. The sacred sites we have visited together, the torchlit processions of Eleusis, the wild mountain groves where Orpheus sang his haunting melodies, the mathematical harmonies of the Pythagorean Brotherhood. All these mysteries continue to whisper their ancient wisdom across the centuries, inviting us to remember truths that perhaps we have always known, but had forgotten in the busy daylight of ordinary consciousness. The Greeks understood something profound about the nature of mystery itself. They recognized that the deepest truths could not be captured in words alone, but had to be experienced, lived, and embodied. The sacred silence that surrounded their most profound revelations was not born of secrecy, but of reverence, an acknowledgement that some wisdom is too vast and beautiful to be contained within the narrow boundaries of ordinary language. In that silence, in those spaces between words, the eternal speaks to those who have learned to listen with more than their ears. Tonight, as you settle into the gentle rhythms of sleep, let the ancient mysteries of Greece accompany you into the realm of dreams. Feel the soft Mediterranean breeze that once carried the scent of olive blossoms and wild thyme across sacred groves. Hear the distant echo of hymns that were sung in temples now fallen to ruin. Their melodies preserved not in stone, but in the eternal memory of the human heart. The torchbearers of Eleusis still walk their sacred processions through the landscape of dreams, their lights guiding souls toward the transformative mysteries that await in the depths of sleep. The questions that drove the ancient seekers: who am I? What is the nature of existence? How can the soul find peace? These questions have not lost their power to transform. They echo still in the quiet moments between waking and sleeping, in the gentle space where consciousness prepares to release its grip on the familiar world and surrender to the greater mystery that cradles us all. The oracles may have fallen silent, the sacred fires may have been extinguished, but the wisdom they revealed lives on in the eternal present of the awakened heart. As your breathing deepens and your body settles into the ancient rhythms of rest, remember that you are part of an unbroken chain of seekers that stretches back through the centuries to those first pilgrims who walked the sacred way to Eleusis. The same stars that guided their footsteps shine down upon you now. The same questions that stirred their hearts stir yours. The same divine mystery that revealed itself in their sacred ceremonies continues to unfold in the quiet sanctuary of your own being, waiting patiently for those moments when the mind grows still and the soul remembers its true nature. The mysteries of ancient Greece remind us that we are not separate from the cosmos, but intimate participants in its eternal unfolding. In the gentle mathematics of your heartbeat, in the sacred geometry of your breath, in the quiet miracle of consciousness itself, the same divine patterns that the ancients glimpsed in their most profound revelations continue to express themselves. You are not just learning about these mysteries. You are living them, breathing them, embodying them in every moment of your existence. Let the gentle wisdom of the ages carry you safely through the night. The sacred groves may have returned to wilderness, the marble temples may have crumbled to dust, but the eternal truths they embodied remain as fresh and vital as the morning dew. In the silence between your thoughts, in the space between your heartbeats, in the gentle transition from waking to sleeping, the ancient mysteries continue to unfold their timeless revelations, whispering their eternal promise that all is well, that you are held and guided by forces more loving and wise than you can imagine. The torchlit processions of the ancients disappear now into the mists of time, but their light continues to shine in the darkness, guiding all who seek truth, beauty, and the sacred connections that bind us to each other and to the cosmos itself. Sleep well, dear traveler, wrapped in the gentle embrace of mysteries that have comforted seekers for thousands of years, knowing that in your dreams you may glimpse the same eternal truths that transform the hearts of those who walked these sacred paths before you. The ancient Greeks knew that sleep itself was a mystery, a daily journey into realms that ordinary consciousness could barely comprehend. Each night, as the body settled into stillness and the mind released its grip on the waking world, the soul would slip its earthly bonds and wander through landscapes that existed beyond the reach of time and space. In these nocturnal journeys, the Greeks believed mortals could glimpse the same divine truths that were revealed in the most sacred mysteries, The same eternal wisdom that flowed through the hidden chambers of Eleusis and the torch-lit groves of Dionysus. The god of sleep, Hypnos, was understood not as a mere biological function, but as a gentle deity who opened the doors between worlds. His realm was neither the bright clarity of waking consciousness, nor the absolute darkness of death, but something in between, a twilight space where the ordinary rules of existence grew soft and permeable. Here, in the gentle embrace of Hypnos, the barriers between self and cosmos dissolved, allowing the soul to remember its divine origins and its eternal connection to the source of all existence. The dreams that came to sleepers were not random neural firing, but messages from the divine realm, communications from the gods themselves. The Greeks developed sophisticated practices for interpreting these nocturnal visions, understanding that the symbolic language of dreams carried wisdom that the rational mind alone could never grasp. In the sacred art of dream interpretation, they recognized that the soul spoke in images, metaphors, and stories that bypassed the limitations of ordinary thought and touched the deeper truths that lay beneath the surface of consciousness. The healing that occurred during sleep was more than physical restoration, but spiritual renewal, a return to the source of life itself. In the gentle hours of rest, the accumulated tensions and conflicts of waking life would dissolve, leaving the soul cleansed and refreshed, ready to face the challenges of a new day with renewed wisdom and compassion. The Greeks understood that sleep was not an escape from reality, but a journey into deeper reality, a nightly pilgrimage to the sacred center where all healing begins. The mystery schools taught that the practice of conscious sleep, of maintaining awareness even as the body rested, was one of the highest forms of spiritual discipline. Advanced initiates learned to navigate the dream realms with the same skill that they brought to their waking studies, using the hours of rest as opportunities for continued learning and transformation. In these practices, they discovered that the boundary between sleeping and waking was itself an illusion, that consciousness was a continuous stream that flowed through all states of being. The sacred geometry that the Pythagoreans found in the movements of the planets was believed to continue its eternal dance in the realm of dreams. As the soul traveled through the nocturnal landscape, it would encounter the same mathematical harmonies that governed the visible cosmos, the same divine proportions that shaped the temple columns and the intervals of sacred music. In sleep, the human consciousness became an instrument in the cosmic orchestra, its dreams contributing to the eternal symphony that had been playing since the beginning of time. The prophetic dreams that came to those who slept in sacred places were understood as direct communications from the divine realm, messages that could guide individuals and communities through the challenges they faced. The practice of incubation, of sleeping in temples and sacred groves to receive divine guidance, was based on the understanding that the gods spoke most clearly to those who had learned to listen with the quiet attention that only sleep could provide. In these sacred dreams, the future was not fixed but fluid, shaped by the choices that mortals made in response to the wisdom they received. The transformation that occurred during sleep was not limited to the individual dreamer, but rippled outward to affect the entire community. The Greeks understood that the dream realm was a shared space where the consciousness of all living beings interpenetrated and influenced each other. The healing and wisdom that came to one person during sleep would subtly benefit all those around them, creating a network of mutual support and guidance that operated below the threshold of ordinary awareness. The mysteries of sleep revealed that time itself was not the linear progression that it appeared to be in waking consciousness, but a vast ocean in which all moments existed simultaneously. In dreams, the past and future would merge with the present, allowing the soul to perceive the eternal patterns that connected all events across the centuries. The ancient wisdom of the mystery schools, the teachings of long-dead philosophers, the insights of future generations yet to be born, all were accessible to those who learned to navigate the timeless realm of sleep. The practices of dream yoga, of maintaining lucid awareness during sleep, were understood as preparation for the ultimate mystery of death itself. The Greeks believed that those who had learned to remain conscious during their nightly journeys would be better prepared to navigate the afterlife, to recognize the divine light that would guide them through the challenges of the post-mortem state. In this understanding, every night's sleep was a rehearsal for the final journey, a gentle preparation for the ultimate mystery that awaited every human soul. The sacred sites of ancient Greece were believed to remain active even after their physical temples had crumbled to dust. In the realm of dreams, the torchlit processions of Eleusis continued their eternal march. The oracles of Delphi still spoke their riddling prophecies, and the wild dances of the Dionysiac mysteries went on without pause. Those who slept with pure hearts and sincere intention could still participate in these ancient ceremonies, receiving the same transformative blessings that had been offered to initiates for thousands of years. The silence that surrounded the deepest mysteries was not broken by sleep, but deepened and enriched. In the quiet chambers of the dreaming mind, the truths that could not be spoken in waking life revealed themselves in symbolic form, their meaning clear to the soul, even when the rational mind could not grasp their significance. The ineffable wisdom of the mystery schools continued to be transmitted through the symbolic language of dreams, ensuring that the ancient teachings would never be completely lost, as long as human beings continued to sleep and dream. The protective power of the mystery initiations was believed to extend into the realm of sleep, creating a sacred space where the soul could rest safely, even as it journeyed through unknown territories. The iron rings of Samothrace, the sacred marks of Eleusinian initiation, the mathematical harmonies of the Pythagorean Brotherhood, all served as spiritual talismans that guided and protected the dreaming consciousness, ensuring that its nocturnal wanderings would lead toward wisdom rather than confusion, toward healing rather than harm. The ancient Greeks understood that as consciousness prepared for its nightly journey into the realm of dreams, it was essential to approach sleep with the same reverence and intention that one brought to the sacred mysteries themselves. The transition from waking to sleeping was not merely a biological necessity, but a spiritual threshold, a moment when the soul could choose to surrender its daytime concerns and open itself to the transformative wisdom that flowed through the nocturnal realm. The bedtime practices of the mystery initiates were designed to create a sacred space around the act of sleep itself. They would begin by purifying their thoughts, releasing the tensions and conflicts that had accumulated during the day, allowing their minds to settle into the quiet receptivity that was necessary for divine communion. The evening prayers were not requests for specific outcomes, but expressions of gratitude for the day's experiences and trust in the wisdom that would come through dreams. The sacred herbs that were burned in the evening hours were chosen not just for their pleasant fragrance, but for their ability to induce the kind of relaxed awareness that was most conducive to meaningful dreams. Lavender from the hillsides of Attica, rosemary from the sacred groves of Delphi, frankincense from the mystery temples of Eleusis, all were understood to create an atmosphere where the divine could more easily communicate with human consciousness. The position of the body during sleep was considered important for the quality of dreams that would come. The initiates would lie on their right side, facing east toward the rising sun, their heads slightly elevated to encourage the flow of divine inspiration. The bedding was simple but pure, made from natural materials that had been blessed in sacred ceremonies and washed in water from holy springs. The moment of falling asleep was approached with conscious intention rather than passive surrender. The initiates would focus their attention on their breathing, allowing each exhalation to carry away the concerns of the day, and each inhalation to draw in the peace and wisdom of the eternal realm. As consciousness began to fade, they would repeat sacred phrases or visualize divine symbols, creating a bridge between waking awareness and the deeper wisdom that awaited in dreams. The journey through the night was understood as a pilgrimage through different levels of consciousness, each offering its own gifts and challenges. The first stage of sleep was like walking through the outer courts of a temple, where the mind gradually released its grip on ordinary concerns and began to attune itself to subtler frequencies. The deeper stages were like entering the inner sanctum, where the most profound mysteries were revealed to those who had prepared themselves properly. The dreams that came to the initiated were not random fantasies, but carefully structured teachings, presented in symbolic form that spoke directly to the soul's deepest needs. The gods would appear not as distant deities, but as intimate guides, offering wisdom that was perfectly tailored to the dreamer's current life circumstances. The ancestors would share their accumulated wisdom. The future would reveal its hidden possibilities, and the eternal truths that governed all existence would manifest in images that the heart could understand even when the mind could not. The practice of dream recall was considered essential for receiving the full benefit of the night's journey. Upon waking, the initiates would lie still for several minutes, allowing the dream memories to solidify before the demands of the day could scatter them. They would then record their dreams in sacred journals, not as mere curiosities, but as divine communications that deserved careful study and reflection. The interpretation of dreams was a sacred art that required not just intellectual analysis, but intuitive understanding. The initiates learned to read the symbolic language of the unconscious, to recognize the recurring themes and patterns that revealed deeper truths about their spiritual development. They understood that dreams were not just personal communications, but messages that could benefit their entire community when shared and interpreted with proper reverence. The healing that occurred during sleep was understood as a collaboration between human intention and divine grace. The body's natural processes of repair and renewal were enhanced by the soul's connection to the cosmic source of all healing. The Greeks believed that many illnesses had their roots in spiritual imbalance, and that the restoration of harmony between the individual consciousness and the universal order was the foundation of all lasting cure. The prophetic dreams that came to those who slept in sacred places were treasured as glimpses of divine will unfolding through time. These visions were not fixed predictions, but invitations to participate consciously in the creation of the future. The Greeks understood that prophecy was not about predetermined fate, but about the recognition of spiritual possibilities that could be actualized through right action and pure intention. The communion with the divine that occurred during sleep was available to all who approached it with sincere hearts and prepared minds. The mystery schools taught that every human being possessed the innate capacity for divine communication, and that the practice of conscious sleep was simply a way of activating this natural faculty. The elaborate initiations and sacred ceremonies were not prerequisites for divine contact, but tools for removing the obstacles that prevented the soul from recognizing its eternal connection to the source of all wisdom. The ancient wisdom of the mystery schools continues to flow through the realm of dreams, offering the same transformative insights to modern seekers that it provided to the initiates of old. The torch-lit processions of Eleusis march on in the landscape of sleep. The oracles of Delphi still speak their riddling truths, and the wild dances of Dionysus continue to dissolve the barriers between human and divine consciousness. In the gentle transition from waking to sleeping, all who seek with pure hearts can still participate in these ancient mysteries, receiving the same blessings that have been offered to sincere seekers for thousands of years. The protective presence of the mystery gods extends through the night, creating a sacred space where the soul can rest safely even as it journeys through unknown territories. The same divine forces that guided the ancient initiates through their spiritual transformations continue to watch over all who sleep with trust and reverence, ensuring that the night's journey leads toward wisdom, healing, and the deep peace that comes from remembering our eternal connection to the divine source of all existence. As your breathing deepens and your body settles into the ancient rhythms of rest, know that you are held and guided by the same loving wisdom that has watched over seekers throughout the ages. The mysteries of ancient Greece live on in the quiet sanctuary of your own heart, waiting to reveal their timeless truths to all who approach the threshold of sleep with wonder, gratitude, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing we are never truly alone in our journey through the vast mystery of existence.